Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming in a new Diablo video. With the preseason ending and the balance patch right before its launch this July 18th, it's time to look back. How did things end up for Rogue overall? What were the best builds and why? Today I'm going to take a look at the 5 best builds and rank them in order of power and relevance to the Rogue meta. As a reminder though, you can find the main builds as video guides here on the channel or in the description of the video. So with that said, let's begin. First up, a twist entry at 5. It's our current fastest rogue kill for the solo Uber Lilith. In my opinion, the build concept of a single target, max DPS, high survivability setup is pretty unique, considering you're just going to be bringing this only to Uber Lilith. With the kill time currently under 2.5 minutes, an absolutely incredible time at that, I feel the build and concept deserves at least a mention if we're looking at preseason overall. So how did someone do this? Well, it was Ron Array who managed to use the popular Bursting Venom style of Twisting Blades build to demolish Lilith. Bursting Venoms is an aspect that causes your poison imbued skills to potentially spawn a toxic pool, dealing damage to those standing in it. But most important is that your poison imbuement has no cooldown and no charge limit while you're standing in the pool yourself. Through that infinite imbuement concept, you are able to apply outrageous levels of poison buildup, looking to stagger and destroy her as soon as possible with that. And that's kind of what everyone's been doing since the original kills, but of course Ron Array has been able to push it a bit further with her own version. The build of course still includes Fists of Fate, which roll ideally can randomly cause up to 300% of a normal attack, which is obviously major if that applies to a poison imbued attack. Mixing that with a lot of attack speed buildup through say your key passive, close quarters combat, accelerating aspect, and the unique dagger, Ashara's Kanjar, which maximizes your attacks that you can get in a short period of time, as well as going heavy on the potency of your imbuements, including putting the corruption aspect on your two-hand weapon, your crossbow, for the maximum effect, alongside running manglers in this situation to potentially daze, which builds up stagger in this situation, as well as say the lucky hit dazing and immobilizing of Fist of Fate. Really, this is just the peak pushing version of that original concept as displayed by Ron Array so well. If you would like to learn more about this build, he actually has a full guide on his channel which shows everything from the talents to Paragon and gear, explaining it, and so I would really recommend you check out the video. Most people just show their kill, maybe show their gear, so I really appreciated him going further and actually explaining everything. So go drop a like on the video if you can. Moving on though, let's get into the overall builds for your general gameplay. Racing through, near level nightmare dungeons to level and grind gear, or maybe you're pushing towards tier 100, maybe you're doing world content or whatever. At number 4 then, I think it's Penetrating Shot. This falls under the others not because it's weak. In fact, it hits the hardest with individual hits out of all these builds. And I love the build for how satisfying it is to say, set up the fight and then pop everything in one hit. And despite the fact that it hits individually the hardest, and the fact that it clears a pack of enemies in one single hit, it's still number 4 because of the playstyle and the way it works. You have to set up the fight correctly. If you're going to clear out everything in one hit, that's going to slow you down ever so slightly to make sure that actually happens. If you want to tone that back and just use a couple shots to do it, and if you didn't fully commit, obviously not everything's going to die in even 2 hits. So there might be some awkward cleanup to do if you're not fully committing every time. And you can't always commit every time because there's cooldowns. Having said that, the experience is far from a bad one. You're still able to absolutely destroy anything and everything. It's up to you to work out how hard you actually need to go each time. The playstyle is brilliant in fact for say higher tier pushing, because you're actually taking a little bit more time to consider each pull, which you're going to be doing at higher tiers anyway. Also, as a long range ability, it has the ability to deal damage from a medium to long range, which is obviously safer because you're avoiding damage by being further away. But we do have to acknowledge that it is a slower paced build compared to the other rogue builds, which can be an issue in your day-to-day gameplay, especially in speed clearing. It's just a bit start and stop. Technically as well, since you're putting everything into one ability, it does suck if you slightly miss aim, or maybe even worse, like miss. That's quite punishing in this build. Ultimately though, it is fantastic in AoE, it's easy to set up and play, there's a lot of great potential here, but compared to the next builds, it's just not nearly as smooth. And number 3 above that then has to be the jack of all trades, master of none, the Barrage build. This, in my opinion, is a fantastic balance of all things rogue, with great AoE, powerful single target. Quite literally, I think this is the easiest rogue build you can play. After all, you're just setting it all up for one ability that requires next to no work to get going. Maybe you do a couple punctures to build up your combo points, aspects, or whatever else, and then pop a barrage. And of course, it's up to you if you want to go harder than that. Maybe you pop a shadow imbue, dash through an enemy, shadow step to an elite and blast them specifically, whatever you want. It's just a very straightforward, really effective way to play. Though obviously I hold it back and keep it a rank 3 on this list because while it might be a jack of all trades, there is of course the other side of that in that it's a master of none. Its AoE is sometimes great, sometimes a bit awkward, like you can intentionally press yourself against enemies if you want to single target blast a certain enemy while playing somewhere more like close to medium range to spread the shots out for actual AoE. But the problem there is obviously the arrows aren't exactly going through. One really quick guy can actually get in the way of the elite you're actually wanting to hit. You might be spreading the damage or hitting the wrong targets from what you actually want to do. So as smooth as this is to pick up and play, there is the minor skill aspect in that you need to actually carefully position and aim the barrage to hit what you're trying to hit. Also, another criticism I could weigh for this is the fact that if you are doing single target, you need to like go up to melee, like press yourself against the target you want to hit, which means you're using a ranged core at melee, which is a shame because obviously that will leave you somewhat vulnerable as you put yourself at melee range. Overall, I find the build so straightforward and fun, really easy to play, and I can definitely recommend it if you want a more chill experience with a normally more high-paced rogue. Above that, number 2 though, is the one that solves all the barrage issues. It's the incredible double core build that is Rapid Flurry. Rapid Fire and Flurry are two amazing core abilities for Rogue, and they both have major downsides to them. Rapid Fire is an immensely strong single target ability, but of course it has issues in AoE. Even with the right setup, it's just not the strongest AoE a Rogue can do. Flurry, on the other hand, is brilliant in AoE. I think it's the best AoE core by far, with that aspect especially that turns it from an awkward cone attack into a full circle around you AoE. That's when it becomes really good. Instant damage all around you, which you can spam or build up power for a bigger AoE burst. It's just so smooth for pack clearing, but its single target is so bad. Bodijo then, the well-known streamer, who in fact was the first to solo 100 in hardcore, also doing it as a rogue, also came up with the double core solution. And it makes complete sense, like having one ability for AoE, one for single target, you get the best of both worlds and just choose which you need to do. I mean, sure, most of the time you are going to be using Flurry to clear packs of enemies, even pop most elites in fact, and make your way through the dungeons at high pace. But every now and then, there's certainly going to be a pesky stronger elite, or one specific enemy, or even the semi-regular boss fight at the end that you're just going to need to single target, and Flurry won't cut it there. So that's where Rapid Fire shines so hard. And what's incredible about Rapid Fire is the fact that it requires so little investment to get it going, and a strong point as well. Like, you're just going to level it 5 out of 5 in the skill tree, grab its basic enhancements, and those massively improve its ability to deal damage in single target. It scales its own damage. As each arrow lands, that pushes the crit chance, and then with advanced Rapid Fire, it deals a hefty 30% times increased crit strike damage after an evade, which synergizes really well with advanced Flurry. When you evade through an enemy, it stuns enemies around you. So there's that inbuilt synergy between those two enhancements and evading. It genuinely is my favorite rogue build overall, thanks to the fun of making those quick choices, all the satisfying synergy, even making use of evades in an offensive way. It's just so fun. However, despite all of that good, it is not the top of the list for Rogue, as close as it actually is. At number 1, above everything else, is still, of course, the Twisting Blade builds. Whether it's the Death Trap focus version or the Imbuement version, this core defines the best rogue builds out there. In fact, it was used as a core to clear a tier 100 with a more defensive focused version, and then also, as we've talked about, the single target build for clearing Uber Lilith. It's also top tier for leveling. Yeah, overall, it's just the most consistent thing you can run as a rogue. It leads to a hit and run playstyle, which lets you deal damage while also avoiding it as a melee style rogue, meaning you lean into being a extremely mobile and high-paced playstyle, which draws in players who want to get more in their moment-to-moment gameplay when they give more. Even after the Twisting Blades nerf earlier in the preseason, it's still just so good. Twisting Blades itself is always going to be amazing because you just look at the advanced Twisting Blades enhancement to realize it's causing the blades to reduce active cooldowns of your abilities as they pass through enemies up to 2 seconds each blade. Combine that with its amazing aspect that causes the blades to spin around you for some extra AoE damage, you're able to reduce the cooldown to those 2 seconds most every time. This is why it works so well with, say, the Death Trap version, in which it helps reduce that longer ultimates cooldown, and that is obviously very impactful. But it's also the reason why it's good with, say, Imbuement builds, because their relatively short cooldown is brought all the way down by that effect, meaning you're constantly popping and blowing things up and applying whatever other Imbuments you're running. Essentially, it's going to deal great damage, it's consistent in all content, it holds the most records for rogues as a build, and you're going to find it brilliant even in the earlier stages of leveling too. So that's why I think it's pretty undeniable that it's won the top spot for Rogue builds in this pre-season. But there you have it. Will Season 1 and its big balance patch change things? Perhaps with those new Malignant Hearts that'll give us new options. But to consider now, my conclusion for Rogue in pre-season is that it's impressively the most balanced of all the classes overall. In terms of its builds and the way they're shockingly close in their meta relevance, meaning, you know, their power compared to one another, I think they've done very well. Just look at some of the other classes who have like 1 or 2 meta builds and then the rest just don't remotely compete with those builds. Rogues, however, find themselves relatively close in power with all their builds. And while Sure Twisting Blades is the winner, it's not by like a massive amount, it's just overall the strongest. So really, props to the balance team behind Rogue. They've done a really good job. Once again though, if you want to check out any of the main builds we've talked about, there are video guides here on the channel or in the description of the video. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.